Ms. Anamika Malla to host the session and proceed the conversation with panelists. Dear participant, you may ask your questions during Q&A session and feel free to drop your questions ahead on the chat box. I think Robin and Harman, you both will support our moderator Anamika to compile the questions. Over to you, Anamika. You may now start.
Thank you, Rajendra. So, good afternoon, everybody. Today, I'm the host, Anamika. I'm a third-year PhD student at Texas Tech University, and I've been a part of NHERI GSC for 2 years. And I would also like to express our gratitude to all the panelists for coming on, taking the time to answer questions for our interested graduate students. So, moving along, I would like to introduce our panelists. The first on our panel is Dr. Abby Beck. She is a research assistant professor at the University of Houston. Dr. Beck holds a PhD in civil engineering from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Dr. Beck's research focuses on equity-driven decision support systems for civil infrastructure, enhancing community resilience to hazards such as hurricanes and earthquakes. Her contributions to the field have been recognized with numerous accolades, including the Mavis Future Faculty Fellowship, the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship, and multiple Best Paper and Poster Awards at international conferences. Let's please welcome Dr. Abby Beck. So I did an awful lot. I think everybody got that. So next, I would like to welcome Dr. Amber Spears. I'm so sorry. Dr. Amber Spears. She is a research assistant professor of civil and architectural engineering at Tennessee State University. Dr. Spear has a PhD from Jackson State University in civil engineering, and she is also a licensed professional engineer in the state of Michigan. Her research focuses on climate-resilient geotechnical solutions, sustainable infrastructure, and intersection of engineering education and workforce diversity. She has published extensively, received Tandon Faculty First Look Fellowship and Graduate Student Scholarship Grant. Moreover, Dr. Spear leads impactful programs such as USDA NRCR Scholars Program, to name one. She has also many other programs she's coordinating. Let's welcome Dr. Amber Spears. The third panelist is Dr. Kostas Kalfas. He is an assistant professor in the Department of Civil Engineering at the University of Texas at Tyler. Dr. Kalfas has a PhD in civil engineering from Southern Methodist University, with certifications as a chartered engineer in the UK and Greece, as well as an engineer in training in Texas. Dr. Kalfas is an accomplished researcher and educator. His work focuses on seismic hazard mitigation, elastometric bearing performance, and sustainable structural damping solutions. He has published extensively in leading journals and presented at numerous international conferences, earning accolades such as first prize in the EMI Dynamics Student Paper Competition. Let's give him a warm welcome. And our final panelist is Dr. Roni Fraser. She is an assistant professor in the School of Public Affairs and a faculty affiliate with the Center of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. Dr. Fraser holds a PhD and MSc in sociology from the University of Delaware. A disaster sociologist, her research focuses on disaster response and recovery, covering topics like emergency management policy, mental health post-disaster, and radiological emergency planning. She collaborates with agency at all levels and teaches FEMA DHS-funded courses through the Texas A&M Extension Service. Her practical experience includes post-disaster field work and volunteer deployments for major disasters such as Hurricanes Laura, Ida, and Ian. Her research has been published in leading journals and presented at venues like IEAM Annual Conference, AAPAM Fall Research Conference. Let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Roni Fraser. And thank you, everybody, for coming on. So I would like to now move on to panelists. If I missed anything, I would like to add anything or say hello. Panelist, did I miss something, or would you like to add something or say a hello?
Hi to everyone. Nice to meet you all.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the wonderful introduction, and it's great to be here today.
Hello, everyone. Looking forward to this discussion. Thank you for including me.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and spend the next hour with you guys.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. So, moving on, I'd like to start the panel with our first questions. I'd like to ask the panelists, please we're not going in order, so please, you can jump in, answer it. So the first question is, how did you decide to pursue a career in academia? And what are the key moments or decisions that shaped your path?
I guess
Yeah,
I can. Okay.
yes.
I can share. I decided to pursue a career in academia following working in industry for 7 years. So I got my bachelor's in civil engineering and then my master's in civil engineering. And I really thought that I would be in industry and potentially go to law school. But I decided to come back for my PhD after seeing that the representation of minorities in civil engineering in the US, where I worked in Michigan, was very low considering, that in education, you know that the percentages are low, but it's even lower when you get out. And so that challenged me as I navigated through some experiences, working on different projects with different companies and things of that nature, and then also seeing the engineers who came in after me and working with them to basically go back and get my PhD and help train the next generation and also tell them sometimes the hard truths that I felt people didn't tell me before I got to industry, and I had to learn them on my own. And it was kind of uh, more than just a culture shock. It was kind of, stifling in ways. And so making sure that students know that up front when they take on this major or to go into natural hazards or to go into civil engineering or STEM.
Thank you, Dr. Scripps.
I guess I'll go next. So I really didn't have an idea that I would pursue a career in academia until my last year of my PhD. So that might be late for some people, but ultimately I was really working towards a career with the federal government, and actually was going to accept a position with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, doing emergency planning and research with them. But ultimately, I said, oh, let me just apply for some positions that I saw that really interested me. And really, the one at Arizona State was really piqued my interest. And so I talked to my advisor about it. And really, as I got closer to finishing my dissertation, I really enjoyed the research I was doing with my advisor and really wanted to continue that. And so the closer that I got to leaving, the more that I wanted to stay because I really loved the research that I was doing. And I couldn't really pursue the same thing if I worked with the federal government. So ultimately, I got two offers at the same time, and I really just took the path of academia, really talking to my advisor and saying that I think that would be the life path for me, wanting to move out west and really try something different. But really having both options and trying to pursue that is really what encouraged me ultimately in the end.
Thank you. So you'd say research is what motivated you and shaped your decision?
Yes. Just because when you work at as Amber kind of said, when working in practice, it's a different kind of lifestyle that you get being from a different perspective as like a PhD student or really a full-time researcher. Really have other people telling you what you have to do instead of you getting to pursue your own work that you really find interesting and that you love. And as I really kind of thought about that often, I just wanted to continue to do my work with mental health and maternal child health and disasters, and I really couldn't do that if I was with a federal agency right now.
Thank you.
And then I think for me, when I started grad school and my PhD, being a professor was always on the radar just in the environment you're in. But I also was fortunate to collaborate a lot with a government agency, NIST. And so I think for me, it was always a long path of trying to decide, do I want to stay in academia? Do I want to go down this more federal route working at NIST? And so for me, as I kind of evaluated things, I was able to mentor students before necessarily I had teaching experience. And so for me, that personally affirmed, in addition to all the research side, but I was like, hey, I like this mentoring. But at a federal agency, you do still have some of those mentoring capabilities and aspects of the job. But then when I finally had the opportunity to TA and actually lecture and interact with students, for me personally, I really realized that I would miss that opportunity to be in the classroom alongside my research and everything else. So I think for me, what finally pushed me over the edge was knowing that I would be an academic, have the opportunity to research and have that flexibility to pursue what was interesting to me, but then also I still would not be losing the interaction in the classroom with students.
So
Thank you.
my career path is in the same lines to that of Roni and Amber. So I worked for almost 7 years before I decided to go back to the academia again. I did my undergraduate in Greece. I'm from Greece. And then I worked in Greece for a couple of years. And then I moved to Germany to work there. I decided I would like to do a master's degree. So I moved to the UK. After that, I joined a consultancy firm there as a bridge designer for a couple of years. And then I decided that I would like to do a PhD and pursue a career in the academia. So in my case, I worked in different areas. I started as a site engineer, then as a bridge designer, and eventually as a researcher. So a key moment in my career was my master thesis, where I realized that I like research, doing research, reviewing research from other academics, conduct my own research and publish work. This is what I liked, and that was a turning point for me, my master thesis, to decide that I want to pursue a career in the academia rather than the industry.
Thank you. So moving so what I get is so I think all of you decided because you liked research and freedom and teaching. So that was the key points. Thank you. So moving on to our next question, how does pursuing tenure track versus non-tenure track roles differ in terms of expectations and career trajectory?
Before we go on, there is a question in chat in reference to what someone answered. In what year do you need to be sure of what you want to pursue and start putting together application materials? It sounded like from Roni that can happen later, but does someone want to speak to that? And if someone puts questions in the chat and you want to respond to them, feel free to do that as well. And then we'll circle back to that last question. Sorry.
So others might have different opinions because I wasn't in engineering. I'm from social science and I was targeting public affairs, so public administration or sociology departments. But I did mine the summer before I was in my fourth year of my PhD, because most of the time, at least for me, the high level schools, so the R1 research institutions, are recruiting in beginning around August, September, and doing interviews kind of late fall. So if you want to be in that first round, you really want to probably start doing your application materials kind of that the summer before your fourth year, or even maybe earlier in the spring, depending on your dissertation schedule.
The same applies in engineering, in the engineering profession. I mean, I prepared my application package like the summer before I graduated, so that I would be able to submit my package during the fall semester. So it's more or less the same.
I would agree. And I'd also add, don't underestimate the time it will take for you to put together the packet either. You definitely want to have a few months to be able to write it and let it sit for a while and then come back to it. So yeah, I agree with everyone. The summer before is probably the best time to be doing that.
And I think one more thing I would add is I would look at different options. Like even if you're not applying now, you can look at what different schools they might be interested, because some schools might require a teaching statement. And so if you only prepared for, let's just say, XYZ university and they didn't require that, then you have to write that separate and you don't want to rush like Abby said. So you want to try to, even if the school that you're like is your number one doesn't include certain things, I would still have it in case you do apply to another university because their job application didn't come up till September. That might help you not rush and be frantic.
So my program was like a sprint instead of a marathon because it was only a 3-year program. And the summer after my second year, I did a study abroad and had a bunch of time-sensitive follow-up work for that. And so I didn't start my first application until very close to the submission date, which was still in like August, September. But what I did do was I connected with our writing center at Jackson State University, the Richard Wright Center for Writing, and I had them review my application materials, and they really helped me put together an application that I would be proud of. But then going through the faculty first look program at New York University Tandon School of Engineering, they also reviewed my application, and that was in April of 2024. So beyond the application cycle pretty much for engineering and things of that nature to start in the fall. So I did improve my application and just thankfully got reached out to for an opportunity to apply beyond that cycle. So I ended up applying in May of 2024, pretty much right after I graduated. And I had already, had an application that I submitted, but made some improvements to. And it's really not very common that people would go through the hiring process in the summer, but they had a position that ended up not being filled. So they reopened that application.
Thank you. That sounds great. So be prepared, have everyone look at your application, and then just make sure that you have like a semester before, or if you can, right? I hope that, yes, thank you. I hope that answers the question. So I think moving should I move on, Robin?
Yeah, I think the next question that you put that you discussed, I put in the chat unless you want to go on to the next question if you think they touched on some of that.
Yeah, we should go on to the next question for now on. So I would like to ask another question is, what are the essential skills that academic employers in natural hazard and disaster research look for in earlier career candidates?
So I guess I'll go first. So
Yeah.
I just started in August, but we went through the hiring process, so I was able to kind of sit on both sides. So I applied last year, did the whole process, but then this year we had candidates come in, and I think really the biggest thing that you could tell between the different candidates is their ability to synthesize their research and make it interesting to an audience that's not familiar or an expert in what they're talking about, because ideally you're going to be engaging with undergraduate students or even graduate students that may not be familiar with what you're talking about. And I think the biggest thing that I noticed between the different job talks, which was probably what people, they may not say it, but really they put a huge emphasis on the research talk or even the teaching talk, depending on the school that you're applying for, is really your ability to engage with people and sell your research in a way that makes it interesting for everybody, and to get you excited to bring you to campus.
Thank you. That's Dr. Kostas?
So this is a tricky question. I have never been in a committee in a search committee. I have only been a candidate. So I think the candidate must show some persistence and some clear ideas of their research. And it is good nowadays to show possible collaboration of their research with other academics in the same broader area, but in different topics. But what I have noticed when I was applying is that every job is different in terms of what every institution is looking for. So, for example, you might be, if I'm not mistaken, Abby works on social sciences as well. So, if the institution and University of Houston in particular, they were looking for someone who they wanted to develop the department and the social aspect of natural hazards, then Abby's work was more familiar than mine, because I work on natural hazards as well, but I am an experimentalist. So if an institution wanted someone to manage their lab, then I was the best candidate. So the skills that every application is looking for is different. But as a general idea, I would say that having a clear approach of how to attract funding, mentor students, deliver your courses, and be enthusiastic, of course, about your work. These are some general skills that I think the search committees are looking for.
Thank you. Yeah, so we should be more and how much do you think like funding or like you've gained funding matters?
I have no idea. I ask the same questions, but I have never received numbers. A number that I received from a colleague, though, where we were discussing such things over a coffee break, it was somewhere between 100 to 300K. But this is just an assumption, and it depends. I think the best approach for an early career faculty is to have a continuation of funding, not the amount of funding. So it is better to have a continuation of funding over the first 5-6 years rather than receive one big funding.
Okay.
But maybe at the end, both approaches will be successful in terms of tenure.
Yeah.
He segued into what I was gonna say, but Roni did say something in the chat real quick. She said, I was told to have enough funding to sustain your research. So that's no specific number. And so before I add on to that as a faculty member, I'm going to say like the feedback I got while I was applying, and the question can be qualified on whether you are looking for a tenure or a non-tenure track position. Because if you're looking for a non-tenure track position, you may only be teaching. And so essential skills are basically examples that you have teaching capability. Did you teach as a teaching assistant during your PhD or your master's or something like that? Were you a laboratory assistant or things of that nature? Versus if you're going for a tenure track, they want to see how much research activity did you have as a graduate student. And a lot of times that does boil down to publications. And so I know that for some programs, they require you to have a certain amount of journal publications in order to successfully defend your dissertation. But even still, the number of publications that the potential employer is looking for could vary depending on the institution. And I know that, we can only write so much. And so I think that, it's good to know very early in your program how many journals you are required to write, and that's journal papers, not conference papers. And then beyond that, looking at prospective institutions you want to apply to and trying to see how many they might see as a typical applicant would have. And that would give you a better idea of, what's possible in the time frame that you have to publish. And then in terms of the funding, I was also concerned about, receiving funding prior to becoming a faculty member. And I found out that that wasn't as much of important as when you become a faculty member. And if you're a tenure track, at my institution, they do have goals within the first 3 to 5 years before you apply to tenure. They want you to reach a certain level of funding that you've acquired for your research. But I think that non-tenure track faculty don't have that same responsibility.
Okay, thank you. That was very everything. You covered everything. Thank you so much. Dr. Abby?
Yeah, one thing I will add on to, I think, about the qualities for sure, a lot of it is going to be very specific based off of the job advertisement. And so I think you have to focus on the skills that you know and how best to market yourself and be confident in that. But also at the same time, acknowledge and be realizing that there are so many other factors at play in the job hiring process that it is not by any means a personal affirmation or let down on your own personal background. It's just at that particular time, that is necessarily maybe not what the university is looking for or is what it is looking for. And also, I think for me, some of the best advice I got from my own advisor that I think is true is you want to be confident in yourself, present yourself as who you are, because you do not want to end up getting into a position where you're expected to conduct research in something that you're not necessarily interested in, because that's going to be a long few years of you maybe not working on something that's interesting to you. So present yourself as best as you can in a way that you can be fulfilled in the work that you would be able to do taking on that position. And so then in terms of funding and grants, I have not been given a number yet. You rarely are. But I think another thing that was also told to me is they do acknowledge like it is difficult to bring in funds and that you take a lot of hits where they don't work out, but it's also part of it to some degree, not as much as the is also showing that your effort and consistent shows
Right. Okay. Sorry, I think I got caught. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. So, thank you for, yeah, that was very helpful. So, what I would like to ask another one more question is, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about academic careers, or how can aspiring academics better prepare themselves for the realities of this career path? Dr. Abby?
So I think one thing, and also as I'm also just starting, so I'm still learning exactly the skills, but I think one of the key one is to know that you are going to have so many unexpected things also that just come your way as well. And so being able to learn resilience professionally and be able to find and say, okay, I need to work on this one day, but then also saying you have something that doesn't work or isn't successful, and to just continue to evolve and find other ways or move on. I think you really have to have a quick memory and acknowledge that something might have happened or not gone wrong, but then just continue working on other things that you have at hand in the moment.
Thank you. Dr. Fraser?
Sorry, I was typing in the chat. So I guess one of the biggest misconceptions. So I guess I'll start with that doing the actual interview process is really not what I anticipated at all, honestly, compared to like a traditional interview. So when you go through the interview process, there were different questions that I really wasn't anticipating, like asking about the culture of the university. I really wasn't expecting a question about that. And then really international collaboration, because as a PhD student, especially during COVID, I had almost zero opportunity to do international relationship building. So that was a really difficult kind of experience for me, going through with specifically Arizona State University. And then when you go on campus interview, it's like a light on fire on your butt, to be honest. Like it is nonstop for like 2 days of interviewing, and I really wasn't anticipating that either. I mean, you get kind of told these certain things, and you might, if you're going through the process next year or even this year, you might reflect on this and say, yeah, Dr. Fraser said that, or Ronnie mentioned that. But really going through that process was really a challenging thing. I did 2 on-campus interviews, and was going to do a third before accepting my job at ASU. But really just know that they are really challenging. And so really prepping for that, like bringing snacks in your bag, is really something that I did not really know, but I was glad I had my airplane snack in my bag at 8, because you just get hungry. But then I think overall, in terms of the career after starting in August, is that it's challenging to make your schedule because you're not going from like 8 to 5. So like there are times I have to stay after hours because I'm working with the student organization because I'm a faculty advisor, or we actually hosted the Bill Anderson Fund Fellows at Arizona State. So I had to go really early and help with the conference that we had. So it's really like all over the place kind of scheduling, depending on when your classes are scheduled, that you don't really necessarily always get to pick when they are scheduled. And then, yeah, I think just the different scheduling. And I think a lot of the undergrads think that all you do is research, or only teaching, but it's definitely a mix of the three because I am on the tenure track, so I do a mix of teaching, service, and research.
So anything can happen.
Oh, absolutely. And depending on your school, they might protect your time as a new faculty member,
Yeah.
especially if you're on the tenure track, because they want to get you to tenure. But you're still a new faculty member, so they still feel like they throw things at you all the time.
Thank you. Dr. Spears?
Yeah, I would just echo everything that was already said about a lot of the time that you have going into various different basically things that you need to satisfy the university's requirements when you become a faculty member, but in terms of if you're still trying to figure out if academia is for you or not, it is a lot of independent work. And so if you are not used to managing your own projects independently and, coming up with your own research topics, and basically knowing when you have to say no, because there is a priority that you have, a deadline that you have, a class that you have to teach or something like that, because you kind of want to do everything because you know that everything leads towards your professional development, and that's a personal thing that has nothing to do with the university. But at the same time, in order to satisfy what you agreed to the university, you have to say no sometimes. So I would just say that your time is your time. There's only so much things that you have to do. Other things you can choose and respectfully decline. And it may end up working in the favor of your university because of you doing that.
Thank you. Dr. Kostas? Sorry, Kalfas. I'm so
Yes,
sorry.
it's okay. Don't worry, Anamika. So,
Yeah.
well, I think Abby, Amber, and Roni covered everything.
Yeah.
But, misconceptions in most cases are different for every person.
Yeah.
So, I will talk about my understanding. When I started wanting to become an academic, I was only thinking about research and how to conduct research, write papers, etc. This is not what happens. In reality, and this is what they ask, and this is normal, research and teaching at the beginning have more or less the same weight. If we can give some hard numbers like 40-40, and the other, or 45-45, and the other 10% goes to service. So this is what I was not expecting. And what Amber said about time is very important. All these small things, like for service, prepare your classes, they take so much time that eventually you watch your watch, it is 8 p.m. and you have done no research. So that was the biggest misconception in my case. Yes, but other than that, working extra hours and not 8 to 5, this is something expecting and normal in academia, I assume.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So this was wonderful because we have so many questions from the chat and everybody is so excited to talk to you guys. I would like to open the floor for the Q&A. You guys can unmute yourself and ask questions. If not, I will start reading them from the chat. So that's okay. So the first question we would like to ask, what are yeah, I think this one has been answered. So we don't necessarily need funding going into the application, but show that we have previously gotten through the course of our PhD. So yeah, so the question is, do a history of having acquired funding is important or essential?
I think it is appealing to have some contact, let's say, with preparing a funding application, even for your PhD advisor. It is appealing to the committee. But of course, this is not necessary. We might not have funding. However, in all my interviews, I was asked to if I have a funding schedule in my mind. And this is important, to have in your mind a few funding agencies where you will attract some money. It does not mean that these applications will be successful, but it is good for the reviewers, for the committee to know that, okay, this candidate, they have an idea of how to attract money and how to proceed, even as a first steps, because during your career, I assume you change.
Yeah. Thank you. Anybody would like to add on that? But we did have talked. I would like to move to another question. Okay, this is from Parisha. She asks how the work-life balance can be managed as a professor in academia. Also, while people follow their own research path, how this path can be restricted to available funding resources. So I think we can go first with the one. How can you balance work life as a professor? Dr. Abby?
I can start with this one. I
Yeah.
think for me personally, what I do is there are some later nights that I end up maybe working late on something, but I think for me, there are certain times where I say I am not working, and this is completely and protect those as much as I would protect like other regular scheduled meetings or needing to go teach my class. For me, that's usually all of Saturday and a good portion of Sunday. Like I need that personally to rest and recharge for a week ahead. And I usually try to look at my schedule. I do have night classes, so I teach at night from 5:30 to 7. And so for me, then it's trying to prioritize at least one or two of those other nights off. Or then I sometimes, since I'm working so much later, I will prioritize and block off and not necessarily start work till 10 or 11 in the mornings that I teach, because I have to be sharp in order to go into the classroom and give a lecture and be engaging with my students at that time of day. So I think it's making sure that you have an ability to block off time in your schedule and try to protect that as much as to your ability.
Yeah. Dr. Spears, would you like to add something?
I was shaking my head because that was so relatable. I took night classes when I was at Jackson State University, and that was very different for me. And I also like my schedule when I was a PhD student there was more so on the afternoon because I didn't want to exhaust myself before I got to class and then not be fully present while I was in class. This past semester, I taught a course that was from 11 to 12:30 a.m. Well, 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. And I had to basically not schedule anything before that class so that I can make sure that I would, be rested and review the material in enough time to be prepared for that class. So I think your schedule does depend on the things that you have to schedule. But then, like Abby said, that you do need to, just like you have to do some things for work, you have to do some things for yourself too.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to move on to the next question. So the next question is, while some people can follow their own research path, how is this path can be restricted to available funding resources? I think meaning like, do we have to be flexible in terms of in choosing a research that we have to deviate from what we want? Dr. Fraser?
Okay. So I guess it depends kind of in what position you're in. So as a tenure track assistant professor, I was hired specifically to work on emergency management, homeland security, and really contribute to the center. And so really I would say I'm restricted, but not totally, in really general emergency management work, pretty open. And that's really what I wanted to do. I am applying for certain grants, and of course that would limit what your scope is. So if it's a 3-year grant, you'd be working on that project for say 3 years, or even if you're applying for small grants, so they might have a seed grant at your university, that might be like a 6 to 12 month project, and you'd be of course limited to what you put in that scope of work, but it would be related to something that you're doing in your department or your tenure home.
So the also like, does university define, does it change? You have to tailor your needs or research according to the university or faculty positions you're applying?
So I would say no. I actually I'm my home right now is in public administration, public affairs, but I'm trained as a sociologist. And I work currently with a geographer and a public policy person. So you don't have to, we depending on like where you're interested in applying, I was really focused on getting an interdisciplinary position because my interest and my background is really in emergency management was interdisciplinary field. And so although I wasn't housed in a public affairs program, I did get mentoring support to help me kind of bridge the gap because I wasn't totally sure how to make my application competitive to that kind of public administration people. But getting that support really helped me kind of focus my job talk and make it relevant to something that they would want to see. But I didn't really change myself, if that makes sense. So I didn't really change the work that I was doing. It's just putting on like a new jacket and making maybe a different color, but it's still the same work in beneath.
Yeah. Dr. Kalfas, does this also go in engineering, or do you have to sometimes change?
Well, I think what Roni discussed goes in any field.
Yeah.
But I would like to share a quote in my own words, though, from a senior faculty here in the States. I read that comment on LinkedIn, and that professor said that it is good to change if you want to change. And of course, our world changed, so we need to adapt our research in the societal needs. However, it is not good to change just for the sake of change. We all have some expertise from our master and PhD degrees, and we have this expertise there, and we followed these topics because we liked those topics in most cases. So if we like them, then we will conduct some meaningful and impactful research on those areas. If we just change our scope only for the sake of attracting money, for example, then most probably we will not conduct good research. This is what I would like to share because I liked this quote. Now, to add to what Roni said, I don't think there is any institution that drives your research who tell you what to study and not. This is up to you. As a tenure track faculty, in most cases, if not in all cases, we are lucky and we have good startup packages. So at least at the very beginning, we can work on what we feel confident and on what we like. However, at a later stage, the only thing in my mind that could drive your research could be the funding attraction. So maybe the research topics do not attract funding. In that case, I assume you need to find something which will be of interest to you and could attract some money. Other than that, at least I have not any personal experience, and I do not know anyone who had any difficulties in terms of what to study.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going for the last questions. I'm sorry if we couldn't answer your questions. If you guys would be willing, everybody can contact you in email and answer questions for them. So the last question, our organizer Rajendra has a question for all of the panelists. Rajendra, I think you can ask the question.
Yeah, sure. I already provided my question in the chat. So, how much were your parents feeling as soon as they heard that you got a job in academia? Were they really happy and enjoying your success? So, if please could you please share us insight of your parents, right? Image.
So I can share my experience very briefly since we have only 5-6 minutes. So in my case, I am a first generation person who entered university. So my grandparents and my parents, they did not enter university. So watching my progress, they were very happy. I don't know how they felt actually. I just saw how happy they were. However, the fact that I am so many miles away from them, this made them sad. So this is a bittersweet feeling for my parents in my case.
Thank you. Dr. Fraser, how did your parents feel?
So my parents are actually really excited about the opportunity to go out west and really change my life because I was going to move to Washington, D.C. So really, I think they were super excited about it.
Yeah, that's good. I think, yeah, obviously. Dr. Fraser, sorry, Dr. Spears, would you like to add
Yes,
something?
my parents were very excited about it. Just getting a PhD because I'm the first person in like under my grandparents on both sides to obtain my PhD, and I'm also a first generation student. My mom did go back to school after I started undergrad, and she did get her bachelor's, but I'm still a first generation student because I entered freshman year without a parent with a college degree. So they're very excited for me, and now my whole family is going to send their kids wherever I'm at, so it's fine.
Congratulations. Maybe not. Dr. Abby?
Yeah, I think it was really excitement. And I think what's also is sometimes depending on how the offer comes, mine wouldn't necessarily, I got an email just saying, hey, do you have time to talk before I got it? But you can know that like necessarily that was like if you're getting it from the chair. And so I remember I called my father and he was like, yeah, I know. And I'm like, no, dad, like I got the email. And so but yeah, I think my family was just very excited for me. So
Thank you guys so much. It was wonderful listening to you, and thank you all for taking this time out and helping like fellow graduate students who are looking for it. Now I'd like to pass it to Rajendra. Rajendra, you can take
Okay.
it now.
Thank you, Anamika, for hosting this event. So we organizer team would like to express our thank you to all the panelists and participants for providing their time, efforts, and participating in valuable discussion. Surely this academic workshop has become a more fruitful to our fellow members who are willing to join academia in their career pursuit. So we are happy to conclude this career workshop. Please invite your friends who are graduate students to join with NSF NHERI GSC.